minuses. Another great showing on film from Trae Waynes. Captain Munnerlyn, 1 plus, no minuses in the slot. Harrison Smith, 1 minus, 2 pluses, and then a third plus with an asterisk, and that would be the hit that he put on Demaryius Thomas that got the Vikings the ball back. He didn't fumble, but it was a third down play, just crushed him. Phenomenal hit, great lick, good momentum shifter, all that stuff. However, watching the replay, it was every bit an illegal hit to the head. Harrison going face into his target's face, lowers his head and hits the other guy in the face and head with the crown of his helmet in no effort to grab or wrap up the guy. So it was every bit an illegal hit and should have been flagged and penalized and negated an awesome stop. So that's why I had an asterisk on his third plus of the game. But if you count that just as a plus, since there was no penalty, he had 3 pluses and a minus and is continuing to be the best safety in football, at least the best safety that I see in football. Let me know if you disagree. And then we had Robert Blanton starting back there in place of Sendejo, which is the lesser of two evils. Okay, and Blanton's not good either, but he's the lesser of two evils in regards to him or Sendejo. What we need to get is Exum Jr. out there starting opposite Harrison Smith. That's what I've been saying since the beginning of the preseason, since before the preseason. If we didn't draft a guy or bring in a free agent, that of the three we've got, Exum is the only candidate to be out there. But for some reason, he's still not out on the field, even though I believe he is now finally healthy. So Blanton was your starter. He had a plus to go with 2 minuses. And then finally, we come to Mr. Terrence Newman. And I have been complaining about his lack of production and his liability status for the first 3 weeks, and this was the icing on the cake. If I am the head coach of the Vikings coming out of this bye week, I have my new starting outside corner, Trae Waynes, the rookie, in place of the veteran Terrence Newman. Terrence Newman was god-awful and he had by far the worst game of any player either side of the ball on film for the Vikings. Let's see. He had 1 plus/minus, whatever the heck that even means, where it was like he made a play but he didn't make a play. Like he probably got burnt, but he still made a good tackle. We're like, yeah, it was a tough tackle, so you get a plus, but you shouldn't have got burnt in the first place, so minus. And then minus. That was Terrence Newman's film results from this last week's game. So Terrence Newman is just a glaring liability. And if you rewatch the game, you will see Denver just identify Newman anytime they're dropping back to pass. And that's where we're going. Pick on Newman. Almost exactly deja vu similar to the way it was last year with one idiot tweeter, Josh Robinson. So we've seen this same song. We know it, and Newman needs to no longer be the starter. Newman shouldn't see the field outside of dime coverage for the remainder of the season, barring injury. And boom, there's your Vikings breakdown for the week, for last week's game against Denver. Now let us try to quickly get in the rest of the results from last week's games, as well as this upcoming week's worth of games, which the Vikings again won't be partaking in because they're on bye. Alright, so we continue now on Balls Breakdown, our new weekly football segment, at least, well, it's got a name now, that's all that's new about it, with a recap of the rest of the Week 4 games. In case you're keeping track at home, I know several of you are. This last week I was 9 of 15 on my picks, so just above 500, but not quite as good as the 12 out of 16 that I had the week before, but still 9 out of 15 on last week's picks. We began the week on Thursday night with the Ravens beating the Steelers 23-20 in very close, entertaining fashion. Did that go to overtime or close to? I don't remember. Anyway, I had that one picked correct. We had the Jets in London, early start time. It was like 8 Central Time, 9 Eastern, something like that here if you were watching in the States. We had the Jets beat the Dolphins. I picked the Dolphins, and that resulted in the Dolphins head coach, Joel Philbin, getting fired. So they have a new interim coach now for the rest of the year. His name's like Dan Campbell or Don Campbell or something like that. He was like the tight ends coach for him or something along those lines. Then we had the Houston Texans get crushed by the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta by a score of 48-21. Had that one pegged correctly. Atlanta goes to 4-0. New York Giants on the road in the battle for New York beat the Buffalo Bills by a score of 24-10. I did not peg that one correctly. Also, the next two incorrectly. The Raiders lose on the road to the Bears by a score of 22-20. And the Kansas City Chiefs on the road lose to the Cincinnati Bengals 36-21. Now back to ones I got right. The Indianapolis Colts at home hold off the Jacksonville Jaguars 16-13. The Colts now have won like 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there, 13-15 divisional games in a row. That's like one of the longest streaks of all time. It almost more speaks to how bad the other teams in their division are and have been. But so the Colts now are 2-2, not playing very good ball yet, but winning their last two games against division foes, and lo and behold, they are in first place in their division, in the worst division in football, by the way, the AFC South. Then, much to my delight, we had the Philadelphia Eagles lose a thriller on the road to the Washington Redskins by a score of 23-20. We had the Panthers on the road beating the Buccaneers 37-23. We had the Browns on the road losing to the Chargers 27-30. I did not think that one would be as close. Vikings on the road at Denver lose 23-20. We discussed I had that one picked wrong. Green Bay Packers at Niners win 17-3. Low offensive output from the Packers there, but still a fairly decisive victory. Then we had the Rams on the road beating their division rival Cardinals 24-22. We had the Cowboys lose on the road in the Sunday night game at New Orleans by a score of 26-20. And we had the Detroit Lions lose in the Monday night game on a dramatic referee non-call on the final scoring drive by a score of 13-10 to the Seattle Seahawks. If you missed that play, Calvin Megatron Johnson was going in for the go-ahead touchdown very late in the game, under 2 minutes to go, maybe even under a minute to go. Cam Chancellor made a phenomenal punch on his arm and the ball to send the ball flying into the end zone right before it crossed the plane of the goal. However, when it got into the end zone, there was only one Seattle defender, was the only person anywhere near the ball. He looked at it and in the air intentionally batted it out of bounds, which by rule should not result in a touchback then, but rather should result in Detroit retaining the ball at the spot of the fumble. However, the referees did not invoke that rule for some strange reason. They decided to neglect it and treated it as a fumble, offensive fumble out of the end zone for a touchback. So Detroit should have won. Seattle got lucky, held off, came out with a win, and that was the finals for your Week 4 NFL scoreboard. So now, just to give you a quick recap of the standings before we go into our next week's picks and then move on to college football quickly. The Patriots in first place in the AFC East, coming off of their bye week, are 3-0. The somewhat surprising New York Jets, behind Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. I said that was going to be the best thing to ever happen to him when Geno Smith got his jaw busted and knocked out for the first 6 weeks or so of the season. They are 3-1 in second place. The Buffalo Bills at 500 with 2-2, and the Dolphins in last place. One of my wild card picks. I had them finishing second in the division. There might still be hope for them. Who knows? Maybe the new interim coach turns it around. They are in last place at 1-3. In the AFC North, we have the 4-0 Cincinnati Bengals off to a very strong, impressive start. They've played really good in all 4 games. We've got the Steelers in second place at 2-2 with Big Ben out and Michael Vick the starting quarterback. Then we've got the Ravens at 1-3, and the Browns at 1-3. Moving to the AFC West, we got the Denver Broncos in first place at 4-0, the Oakland Raiders at 2-2, and the Chargers at 2-2, both tied for second there. And then my other wild card pick, my AFC West division winner, Kansas City Chiefs preseason pick, in last place at 1-3. Not looking good for me there. And then in the AFC South, at an impressive 2-2, we have the Colts in first place, followed by the Titans at 1-2 because they had a bye last week, and then the Texans and Jaguars tied for last at 1-3. Then we move to the NFC, where in the South we've got the 4-0 Panthers tied with the 4-0 Falcons. I would say my best guess there is Falcons are for real. Panthers are fairly overachieving, and due to weak schedule, Falcons a little bit weak schedule too, but I think, like I said, they're much more the for real team out of those two. But who knows, I probably just jinxed them now and I'll be wrong there too. So those two are tied for first at 4-0, and then tied for last would be the 1-3 Buccaneers and the 1-3 New Orleans Saints, who just got their first win Sunday night over the Dallas Cowboys. In the NFC North, the Green Bay Packers, boo, are 4-0 in first place to no one's surprise, followed in second place by my 2-2 Minnesota Vikings. Then in third we have the 1-3 Bears, and in last the 0-4 Lions. In the NFC East, we have the 2-2 Cowboys, the 2-2 Giants, and the 2-2 Redskins, all tied for first, and one game out would be the last place 1-3 Philadelphia Philadelphia Eagles. And finally, in the NFC West, we have the Arizona Cardinals at 3-1 in first place, followed by the St. Louis Rams and Seattle Seahawks, both 2-2, and in last place the 49ers at 1-3. All right, now let's move to this week's picks. And for the picks, I will be giving the spread. I try to include those as well every week for those who, can use that type of information. And for the record, last week I was 7 out of 15 on my spread picks, as opposed to my 9 out of 15 on just straight up winners. So in the Thursday night matchup, we've got another interesting divisional matchup with the Indianapolis Colts at the Houston Texans. Now, Andrew Luck did not play in their win last week. Matt Hasselbeck was the starting quarterback. However, it does sound as though he is good to go, or at least good enough to go this Thursday night in the division game on the road at Houston. Houston is a 2.5 point favorite. I will pick the Indianapolis Colts to continue their division win streak. However, Houston Texans are a great defense, is a great value pick on weekly fantasy sports in the event that Andrew Luck continues to struggle, or in the event that he isn't healthy enough to play. Look for J.J. Watt and the rest of that defense to potentially wreak havoc either way, so an upset would not surprise me. However, 3-point spread, Colts, if they can play their best and are healthy, are by far the better team, so I will pick the Colts to win the game and cover the 2.5 point spread. Alright, then and their division win streak to continue. Next, we have the Washington Redskins at the Atlanta Falcons. On paper, that should be a 7.5 point favorite for the Falcons. On paper, that should be a slam dunk for the Falcons to both win that game and cover the spread. However, I've been saying preseason when they named Cousins starting quarterback, as well as throughout the season here now, don't underestimate the Redskins. They're a better team than people think they are, at least when they play their best. But again, I'm still going with the safe pick of Falcons, and don't be afraid to take the Falcons in Eliminator or Survivor League if you still got them at home against the Redskins. That should, like I said, on paper, that should be an easy win. Next, we got the Buffalo Bills at the Tennessee Titans. Titans a 2.5 point underdog. I'm taking the Bills to bounce back from their loss last week, cover the spread, and win the game. Next, we got the Chicago Bears at the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs are a 9.5 point favorite. Granted, the Chiefs are a better team than their 1-3 record would suggest, and the Bears are a worse team than their 1-3 record would suggest. And Kansas City is at home. However, no reason to agree with that spread at all. And you never know now with Cutler back in, Clausen out. The Bears at least have a chance. So I'm picking the Bears to cover the spread. However, I will pick the Kansas City Chiefs to win the game at home over the lowly Bears. However, in under. The final score will